Forest soil and canopy processes define the fluxes of matter and energy between living organisms and the forest environment. Similar processes occur in all ecosystems. So we can define differences among, say, forest types, or differences between aquatic and terrestrial environments by understanding differences among the fluxes of matter and energy. How much light does this aspen canopy absorb compared to a conifer forest? Is all of the absorbed light converted into tree growth? How does the portion of light that aspen converts into biomass compare to that for conifers? To answer those types of questions we need some careful measurements and analysis. We measure ecosystems based on the quantities of energy and material in a compartment, and how that material flows from one compartment to the next. For instance, we can measure the flux of nutrients from the canopy to the soil by trapping leaves and twigs as they fall to the ground. Or, we can measure the amount of light absorbed by forest canopies. Absorbed light is the difference between the amount of light at the top of the canopy and the amount below the canopy. We talk about quantities as being in pools, and we can measure pools of matter by weight, length, and volume, or chemical concentrations and quantities in, say, tree leaves or soil organic matter. We can measure the pools of energy by the brightness of light, the amount of heat, or the number of calories. Ecosystem processes measure transfers or transformations of material from one pool to another. We can measure how the quantity of one pool changes relative to another and use that information to estimate the rate of flow between pools. For instance, we can measure the carbon dioxide decline in the air around a leaf to learn about photosynthesis. How fast does carbon dioxide decline, or what's the photosynthetic rate? Quantities of matter and energy are also called stocks. So, we can talk about pools and fluxes, or stocks and flows. Ecosystem processes are the flows of matter and energy from one pool to another. What materials can you think that flow in a forest? Some examples include nutrients like nitrogen, calcium, or iron. Carbon is another material that flows through forests. Plants fix carbon through photosynthesis, and when that carbon is used as food, it is released back to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Water also flows through forests. It enters the ecosystem as rain and snow, and it leaches into groundwater or leaves the ecosystem through evaporation and transpiration, or evapotranspiration. Biomass also flows in forests. It is important as forage for wildlife, and as fuel for wildfire, or we can remove biomass as timber products, including lumber, firewood, and pulp for making paper. Gases such as oxygen also flow in forests. Animals breathe in the oxygen that plants produce as a byproduct of photosynthesis. What form does energy take as it flows in forests? The sun provides all the energy that drives ecosystem processes. Sunlight warms the environment so that chemical reactions can proceed. Sunlight also provides the energy that is fixed in photosynthesis. Plants convert the sun's energy, or short-wave radiation, into chemicals such as sugars, starch, and cellulose. Chemical energy flow is associated with gains and losses of electrons. So, ecosystem processes involve transfers and transformations of matter and energy as they move from one pool to another. Decomposition of organic matter is an example of an ecosystem process that is important to forest productivity. Pieces of organic matter come from plants as they lose leaves and branches. Animals also eat forage and prey, and pass the undigested organic matter. Litter, fall and poop is deposited in the soil where it is further decomposed by microscopic organisms or microbes like bacteria and fungi. Visible tissues of microscopic fungi are often seen as mushrooms growing on the forest floor. These fungi get their energy through symbiosis with living tree roots, or by decomposing organic matter in the forest floor. Decomposition of organic matter also releases nutrients into the soil solution so that it can be taken up by plants and other microbes. Soil nutrient cycling processes supply most of the nutrients acquired by forest trees. Ecosystem processes operate at different scales. Processes occurring at small spatial scales occur in shorter time spans. Cellular processes like membrane transport occur in seconds to minutes. Individual organisms function at the physiological and population level, and those processes occur in hours to months. Succession of plant communities in an ecosystem can take decades, while landscape processes like soil development and species adaptation will take millennia. Units of measure are very important to evaluating the scale of processes. Forest productivity is measured in units of megagrams per hectare per year, while transpiration is measured in millimoles per meter squared per second. It's important to think about the time it takes for a process to occur, and the spatial extent in which those processes take place. Climate is the main factor that governs the type of ecosystem that can develop in a certain region. In the inland northwest we see that cedar and hemlock develop in moist montane locations and ponderosa pine develops at the border between prairie and forests. Climate is one of the state factors that determines the type of ecosystem that can develop at a location. The state factors that control ecosystem development are also strongly related to the types of soils that develop. These state factors controlling soil development include climate, site geology, topography of the land, the living organisms, and the age of the soil. The interactions between these state factors and forests are major components of this course. Here are some things you should take away from this mini lecture. What defines ecosystem processes? How do we measure ecosystems using pools and fluxes? Examples of matter and energy flowing through ecosystems. What is the common process that supplies microbes with energy and trees with nutrients? The influence of time and space on soil and canopy processes. State factors that predominantly control ecosystem function.